From The Guardian on March 16, 2024 comes this headline: Scientists divided over whether record heat is acceleration of climate crisis. The subhead is, quote, some believe global anomalies are in line with predictions, but others are more concerned by speed of change, end quote. Color me shocked. Apparently, some of the scientists in question are acting as if they are ecologists and are therefore concerned about the rate of environmental change. Here's the lead. Quote, record temperatures in 2024 on land and at sea have prompted scientists to question whether these anomalies are in line with predicted global heating patterns or if they represent a concerning acceleration of climate breakdown, end quote. Even the renowned political body that requires governments of the world to concur with its reports acknowledges that Earth is in the fastest rate of environmental change in planetary history. Yet some so-called climate scientists are, quote, divided over whether record heat is an acceleration of climate crisis, end quote. We must assume these so-called scientists are paid climate scientists. Returning to the article in The Guardian, we find these two paragraphs. Quote, heat above the oceans remains persistently, freakishly high despite a weakening of El Niño, which has been one of the major drivers of record global temperatures over the past year. Scientists are divided about the extraordinary temperatures of marine air. Some stress that current trends are within climate model projections of how the world will warm as a result of human burning of fossil fuels and forests. Others are perplexed and worried by the speed of change because the seas are the Earth's great heat moderator and absorb more than 90% of anthropogenic warming, end quote. Apparently, the division mentioned in the title of the article at The Guardian refers to whether or not, quote, current trends are within climate model projections of how the world will warm as a result of human burning of fossil fuels and forests, end quote. Is The Guardian creating an issue out of an insignificant matter? Can we not have, quote, anomalies in line with predicted global heating patterns that also represent a concerning acceleration of climate breakdown? In other words, can we not agree that, quote, global anomalies are in line with predictions, end quote, and also be, quote, concerned by speed of change, end quote? After all, global anomalies concur with predictions by some researchers. In addition, the accelerating rate of environmental change is obviously an issue of concern to anybody who understands the importance of the rate of environmental change. Again, is The Guardian creating an issue out of an insignificant matter? As with other media outlets, The Guardian makes money by distracting and dividing the masses. In this case, the division does not appear sufficiently significant to rank as an issue of concern. I think we can agree with a quote from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change in its October 8, 2018 report, Global Warming of 1.5 Degrees. Quote, global level rates of human-driven change far exceed the rates of change driven by geophysical or biosphere forces that have altered the Earth system trajectory in the past. Even abrupt geophysical events do not approach current rates of human-driven change, end quote. Are there, quote, climate model projections of how the world will warm as a result of human burning of fossil fuels and forests, end quote? Yes, there are. So far, these projections have largely proven scientifically conservative. I need not mention that many of the models include techno-fantasy solutions and unicorn dreams built into them that significantly lower the rate of environmental change and the impact on organisms. Again, these factors contribute to the scientific conservatism of these models. Are there also other scientists who are, quote, perplexed and worried by the speed of change because the seas are the Earth's great heat moderator and absorb more than 90% of anthropogenic warming, end quote? I suppose some scientists are still perplexed and worried by the speed of change, although I wonder under what rock these people have been hiding. Let's turn to another article in The Guardian, this one from April 6, 2024, entitled, Simply Mind-Boggling. World record temperature rise in Antarctic raises fears of catastrophe. Here's the subhead, quote, an unprecedented leap of 38.5 C in the coldest place on Earth is a harbinger of a disaster for humans and the local ecosystem, end quote. I'll read directly from the first three paragraphs of this article. quote, on March 18, 2022, scientists at the Concordia Research Station on the East Antarctic Plateau documented a remarkable event. They recorded the largest jump in temperature ever measured at a meteorological center on Earth. According to their instruments, the region that day experienced a rise of 38.5 C above its seasonal average, a world record. This startling leap in the coldest place on the planet left polar researchers struggling for words to describe it. Quote, it is simply mind-boggling, end quote, said the professor and science leader at the British Antarctic Survey. Quote, in sub-zero temperatures, such a massive leap is tolerable, but if we had a 40 C rise in the UK now, that would take temperatures for a spring day to over 50 C, and that would be deadly for the population, end quote. The amazement was shared by a glaciologist at the University of Exeter. He told the Observer, quote, no one in our community thought that anything like this could ever happen. It is extraordinary and a real concern. We are now having to wrestle with something that is completely unprecedented, end quote. The lead is buried in the fifth paragraph, quote, nor has this huge temperature hike turned out to be an isolated event, scientists have discovered. For the past 2 years, they have been inundated with rising numbers of reports of disturbing meteorological anomalies on the continent, end quote. In a surprising admission, at least to me, the article in The Guardian registers concern to non-human species in quoting a professor of chemical oceanography based at the British Antarctic Survey. Quote, we are already seeing serious ecological impacts that threaten to spread through the food chain, end quote. The professor indicated that the algae growing under and around sea ice in West Antarctica are disappearing. Algae are eaten by krill, the tiny marine crustaceans that are one of the most abundant animals on Earth. The professor of chemical oceanography said, the krill provide food for predators such as fish, penguins, seals, and whales. Quote, if krill starts to disappear in the wake of algae, then all sorts of disruption to the food chain will occur. End quote. The threat posed by the disappearance of krill goes very deep. Krill play a key role in limiting additional planetary heating. Algae absorb carbon dioxide. Krill then eat the algae and excrete it, with the feces sinking to the seabed and staying there. Decreased levels of algae and krill would then mean less carbon from the atmosphere would be deposited on the ocean floor, and would instead remain near the sea surface, where it would quickly return to the atmosphere. According to the professor of chemical oceanography, these tiny organisms, quote, act like a conveyor belt that takes carbon out of the atmosphere and carries it down to the deep ocean floor where it can be locked away. So if we start messing with that system, there could be all sorts of other knock-on effects for our attempts to cope with the impact of global warming. It is a scary scenario. Nevertheless, that, unfortunately, is what we are now facing, end quote. The article in The Guardian points out that larger organisms are already showing negative signs of an overheated planet. The emperor penguin, found only in Antarctica, suffered a catastrophic breeding failure last year. The platforms of sea ice on which these animals are found exist only on Antarctica. A scientist with the British Antarctic Survey said, quote, the loss of sea ice in this region during the Antarctic summer made it very unlikely that displaced chicks would survive, end quote. A professor and science leader at the British Antarctic Survey was quoted in the Guardian article. Quote, it is simply mind-boggling. In sub-zero temperatures, such a massive leap of temperature is tolerable. But if we had a 40 C rise in the UK, now that would take temperatures for a spring day to over 50 C, and that would be deadly for the population, end quote. The science leader is referring to the human population, while not explicitly indicating that life on Earth is inextricably interconnected. In a related note, the State of the Climate 2023 was published on March 19, 2024. Not surprisingly, the key messages included these 5 bullet points. 1, quote, 2023 was the hottest year on record by a clear margin, end quote. 2, quote, records were broken for ocean heat, sea level rise, Antarctic sea ice loss, and glacier retreat, end quote. 3, quote, extreme weather undermines socioeconomic development, end quote. 4, quote, renewable energy transition provides hope, end quote. And 5, quote, the cost of climate inaction is higher than the cost of climate action, end quote. 3 out of 5 isn't bad. Item 4 indicates a lack of knowledge about 2 key items. A, civilization is a heat engine, and B, hope is a lie and a mistake, based on its definition. Item 5 suggests a lack of knowledge about the aerosol masking effect. If there are relevant actions that can be taken at the societal level, I do not know what they are. What are these relevant pragmatic actions I keep hearing about? There is at least one scientist who is not surprised by these abrupt changes. You can probably guess who it is. However, I guess this is fine.